Hey, and what is going on, everybody? It's Scion Life back here with another video, and today we are going to be talking about five alternatives to popular JDM cars. Now, I'm just going to be giving you a list of five cars that are cheaper and more budget-friendly alternatives to very popular JDM cars. Shout out to Eric A on YouTube for suggesting this video. If you like this kind of content, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. But without further ado, you already know the deal, so let's go ahead and get on with the video. And so the first car that we're going to be talking about an alternative for is the Toyota Supra Mach 4. Now this car, as you guys know very well, this car came with a 2JZ engine, which is very buildable. It can make upwards of 800, 900 wheel horsepower on a stock block. But the problem with this car is that it starts in around $50,000 for a semi-nice one, and parts are extremely expensive for the 2JZ, especially to upgrade the turbos, all that kind of stuff to build the engine especially. That's a lot of money. So the alternative that I would suggest would be the Mach 3 Supra. Now, this car came with a 1JZ engine. It's not quite as great as the 2JZ. It's not quite as defined, but it is still a very good engine at pushing power. You can make upwards of around 600-ish wheel horsepower in it on a stock block, and parts are a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to build these engines simply because they themselves are cheaper in the market. Not to mention the car is about half the price of the Mach 4 Supra. You're not really giving up any cornering, as the Mach 4 Supra was not really known for its cornering anyways. So I would suggest the Mach 3 Supra. Very buildable, very reliable, just like the 2JZ. It's still built by Yamaha and Toyota. There's a lot of aftermarket support for it. Even though it's not exactly the best car in terms of cornering, it is a great roll racing build. So yeah. And now for the second car on this list, it is going to be the car that lost to a Chevrolet Cobalt around the Nürburgring. That's right, it is the R34 GT-R. These cars are extremely overpriced. It comes with an RB26, which is an engine that is not as buildable or as durable as the 2JZ that comes in the Mach 4 Supra. And now in the modern market, I have seen these cars go for well over six figures, well into the six-figure range rather. I've seen some of them go for around 200,000, 250,000 for like the Midnight Purple examples of the R34 GT-R. That's like Lamborghini pricing, and that is ridiculous for a Nissan, of course. Now, the alternative car that I would suggest would be the R32 GT-R. It also came with an RB26 motor with a twin turbo, of course, but the R32 GT-R had a 2.6 liter of displacement compared to the 2.8 liters in the R34 GT-R. Now, you can basically do the exact same thing with the motor, with the build. You have the same kind of reliability with the 2.6 RB26 as you do with the 2.8 RB26. Obviously, there's not a huge benefit in track performance with the R34 GT-R. As I mentioned earlier, it lost to a Cobalt around the Nürburgring. Now, some people do prefer the styling on the R34 GT-R. They like the wing, they like the body kit, but you can just buy a conversion kit for the R32 GT-R and make it just look just like the R34 GT-R, and it would be a lot cheaper. The R32 GT-Rs, they go for somewhere around 41,000 compared to the R34, as I mentioned earlier, which goes well into the six-figure range. Now you have the same durability, reliability, buildability in the engine. You can put all the cosmetic mods on the R32 that you want to make it look like an R34. But personally for me, I really love the look of the R32. I think it looks better than the R34. And I know that's going to be an extremely unpopular opinion, but that is just how I feel with the car. I would honestly prefer to build an R32 GT-R over an R34 GT-R anyways, and the fact that it's a quarter of the price of an R34 does not hurt. And now for the third car on this list is kind of a weird alternative to this one. But the car I want to give an alternative to is the first generation Acura NSX, and in a sense, the second generation NSX as well, even though the second generation has not performed as well as the first, but I'll mostly be talking about the first here. So, the first generation Acura NSX, it came out in the 90s and it competed with Ferraris at the time. Now, this was one of Japan's most hyped cars because it competed with the best high-end sports cars and supercars on the market at the time. This was a great mid-engine platform, but recently, a couple years ago, you could find a first generation Acura NSX for under 40 grand. Now they're up somewhere in the range of Lamborghini Gallardo prices, and it's probably not worth it unless you just really like the first generation NSX, of course. So my recommended alternative to the NSX would be the Toyota MR2. Now, it's not just because of the mid-engine setup, although that does have a big role in me saying that the MR2 is a good alternative. But the MR2 was a great handling car, and it competes very well, especially on curvy mountain passes and back roads like the Acura NSX did in the 90s. And this car is considerably cheaper. You can find these cars for under 20 grand, sometimes even under 10 grand for a not so great kept one. But these cars are an amazing entry sports car, and they have one of, if not the best engine that Toyota ever produced. The early generation ones had the 1ZZ in them, and I believe the later generation ones had the 2ZZ. Now, the 2ZZ is actually a lot better than the 1ZZ. It's a very buildable engine, it's more durable, it's more reliable, and it is a great platform to build on. But you will not be buying an MR2 for straight line speed. The main reason I chose this car was because of its cornering capabilities. The first generation NSX in the 90s was amazing on the track and on mountain passes alike. This is why it had such a great reputation with keeping up with supercars and even doing better than stuff like the Ferraris at the time during the 90s. Now, the MR2 is not quite on that level, but of course, at the price point it's at, you get a heck of a lot of performance. You get a lot more bang for your buck. And this car's cornering is really unmatched. It's something akin to like a Lotus, or even like a base model Porsche like a Cayman or a base 911 or a Boxster or something like that. So you get European levels of performance in a Japanese car that will not break the bank. Now, this is just like the first generation Acura NSX, and in a sense like the second generation, but the second generation hasn't been as successful. And this is why I think it would be a great alternative to you NSX fanboys, because it competes with high-end European sports cars while still having that JDM feel and build to it. And now for the next car in this video, I'm going to be giving you an alternative to the Nissan Silvia S15. That's right, we're going back into the Nissans here a little bit. Now, the S15, you cannot get them in the United States or Canada unless you import one in from Japan. And this, of course, can be extremely costly and time consuming. A lot of people do not have the patience, the time, or the money to import in an S15 Silvia. It's a very good car. It's a very good handling car. It's even a pretty good drift car. But the car I would recommend would be the Nissan 300ZX. And here's why. You basically get everything that you want out of the S15 in a cheaper and more abundant car. The Z32 came with a VG30 DETT motor, at least the twin turbo models did. The base models came with a non-twin turbo version of this V6 motor. And now this car has everything you want out of a Nissan. It has great reliability in most respects, in most cases at least. It has great buildability. These engines stock can handle a ton of power, especially with upgraded turbos. You get the cool kind of 90s Nissan JDM styling where it's that cool wedge shape. It may not be quite as elegant or beautiful looking as the S15, but I do think the 300ZX is a very good car. Now, the only downside here would be, of course, you get those Nissan trumpet sounds. But I mean, with this engine, the reliability, the buildability, it has everything that the S15 has and more, simply because you can find it, very local to you. It's very cheap. It's very cheap to get parts as well, as these cars are very abundant. As I said, there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of aftermarket support for them, and they are great for a lot of different things. Whether you want to do a power build, a track build, you'd have to upgrade the suspension a little bit, of course, or even a drift build. I have seen some drift 300ZXs in my time as a car guy. So if you are looking for an S15 Silvia, but you do not have the money to import one in from Japan, I would highly suggest the 300ZX. At least give it a look, because, man, this is a really underrated car. It's a great car. It's probably my favorite alternative car on this list, to be honest. So now for the fifth and final car on this list, it's going to be a car that a few years ago, it would have made the best JDM cars that you can buy for cheap or relatively for beginners. It was a great starter car, just a few years ago, but in recent years, it's really shot up in price. So this car is the Honda S2000. As you guys know, this is a Honda. It's very reliable, has a very buildable engine, and the handling, the 9,000 RPM redline, I mean, all of that is really unmatched. But I'm going to try and get as close as I can on a budget with this car that I'm going to mention for the alternative to the S2000. So the alternative I would suggest would be the NB Miata. I'm not going to say the NC Miata because that car is very ugly. It looks like a cat. But the NB Miata is a convertible like the S2000. It has a smaller displacement engine. It has, of course, it doesn't have the flip-up headlights. The NA Miata has gone up a ton in recent years. So as you guys know, the S2000 is a renowned car for its handling. And the NB Miata is also not a joke. It has amazing handling, maybe not quite as on par as the S2000, but the difference is you can get an NB Miata for around 5 to 10 grand, and S2000s in the past couple years have shot up to around 30 grand for even the lower end of the decent models that are still available. Some S2000s, like very low mileage ones, are going for in the ballpark of 40 grand. That's more than the price of a new Corolla. That's kind of ridiculous in my opinion for a car from the mid 2000s. So I believe that you can have the same amount of fun on curvy back roads with the Miata as you can have with the S2000. The only thing that you will be missing is, of course, the Honda 4-cylinder and the 9,000 RPM redline, but that shouldn't be a problem in the NB Miata. So although it doesn't rev quite as high and the engine isn't as buildable as the S2000's motor, it is a great handling car. You can really throw this thing around and have a lot of fun. Whether you want to be drifting or take it on some back roads or some mountain passes, this car is sure to excite you. It will certainly not disappoint. So I felt like I gave some pretty good budget-friendly alternatives to the 5 cars I mentioned on this list. Most of these cars are overrated, especially for the price point, so I just wanted to give some alternatives so that people that are on a stricter budget have something to look at that has the same kind of feel as the car that they're fanboying over. So if you think I missed a car on this list, let me know down in the comments below. But as always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to leave a like, and if you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing and following along for more content like this. But for now, this is Scion Life, signing out.